Dude, you are getting well. Dude, hello and welcome to Dude, You're Getting Well. This is the podcast where we talk about how leaders transform their pain into their purpose and how they take care of themselves today. I'm your host, the dude, Ben Curtis, and it is my pleasure to have for our very first episode. This is our very first official episode. I want to say already thank you to all of you who have joined and subscribed. If you haven't, be sure to do so. And to start off our very first episode, our official one, it is my pleasure to introduce a man who I met in the circles of New York City and in some beautiful healing spaces and artistic spaces. And he's a man I've looked up to, probably since I was a little kid. You may know him from Revenge of the Nerds or ER or Top Gun or Inventing Anna, or because he's a beautiful human, or from his organization 1 and 6, or from anything else that he's in, because he does a lot of service in the world, on screen and off. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone, here is Anthony Edwards. Dude.
Hi, dude.
Hey, dude. How are you doing today, Anthony?
I'm good. I'm feeling honored that I'm here with you for your kickoff.
Well, it's an honor to have you. I don't know if you knew that you were the first official episode, but I decided it would be a great fit. Even though we've had a lot of different guests in the works and coming episodes, but you were a power puncher for me, and I have seen you do so much service in the world, on and off screen, like I said, and so it just felt like and it's been a wild time for you. So I just want to acknowledge you being here. You've been through a lot of spaces lately, energetically and physically and emotionally, I'm sure, and hopefully we'll get to talk about a lot of that different stuff. Mostly, I want to thank you for spending your time here with us, and thank everyone for being here. So, Tony.
Yeah. Where do we start?
Well, I want to start with a confession. So, and I don't even think I knew this when I first met you, but I had the lyrics to Danger Zone handwritten on that old printer paper with the holes punched on the side and pasted on my mirror, and I used to sing that in the mirror and envision my days as a naval aviator, even knowing that I could die. But there's this tall-haired, handsome, this tall, blonde-haired, handsome guy. That's how I was introduced to you. I don't think I saw Revenge of the Nerds till I was a little older. Like, my parents were probably a little less excited for me to see that as a youngster. But I was born in 1980, and so I saw that. And Goose, of course everyone wants to identify with the bad guy, but I was always like, what about the friend, And I kind of knew since I was a kid that I wanted to be an actor, but I think one of, seeing you in that role was one of the reasons I'm probably here doing what I do today. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to tell you that. I don't think I've ever gotten to tell you that. I mean, we've had some fun, Top Gun back and forth things before I ever knew there's going to be a sequel.
Well, you're not alone, Ben, and not about me, but in what happens, when we're young and something gets in and hits a truth in us and it wakes us up. And I had that same experience when I was a kid, and I saw an actor and I saw him on stage, and I just was like, that's what I want to do. It lights you up. And I think it happens for athletes as well, or musicians, or all different kinds of artists, or or even doctors for that matter. You know, I mean, my son's best friend in high school, I was like, she's going to be the best actress in the world. And then at 16, all of a sudden she's like, I really want to be a brain surgeon. And she's like a full doctor now. Like she just, like those things hit you and it's important, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, it's really beautiful. I just think it's really cool that I've gotten to meet you back in my, like, you've come back into my life, 40 years later. David Copperfield was also someone I first saw that made a big influence on me. And I actually got this, he called me on the phone once when I was the Dell dude. Somehow a magician, because I was also a professional magician for 20 years. I don't talk about that a lot. But I was going to school for it in New York, and I was studying with magicians, and one of those grew up, and he worked with David Copperfield. And somehow they shared my story, and all my stories started with, oh, when I met David Copperfield, blah, 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 which I never actually did. I just wanted to. I had the chance to. And he ended up calling me and thanking me for all the great press years later, but we never got to meet.
That's wow. It's so funny. There's another crossover because magic was huge for me when I was a kid.
Really?
Yeah, I was really into magic, and I had a magic kit. I had a magic show when I was 12, and
yes,
I poured doves, and so I would produce a rat. I borrowed a friend's like pet rat, and that's what I produced. But
that's incredible. How did you get into magic?
It was around in Santa Barbara. There was a magic shop, but years later, I became a huge Penn and Teller fan. And they said my favorite thing that any magician or anybody's ever said actually about kind of the world that we're in, which is when you go home tonight, it's not, when you're thinking about it, it's not how we do these tricks. It's why we do them. And that's like, that was like magic. That was the magic to me, because it's the fact that we need this. We need to be stimulated. We want our imagination. We want our heart. It's not to be fooled. We want to be awakened to the unknown. And like we live in society, it's all about, black and white, black and white, black and white. But as artists or as human beings, the fact is the gray area, the unknown, the mystery, as Marty Moran, the great writer and performer, says, we live in the mystery. And how can we live a life in the mystery and trust that? How can we do that when life or the world is telling us like, no, either you're young and beautiful or you're, it's all black and white. And that's the world that we want to feel comfortable in, is the mystery.
Yeah. Amen to that. Yeah, the magic and the fun. And that's what's there when we're children. And I think a lot of adults, one of the reasons I started working with men is because I saw it mostly programmed in men and less spaces for help for men, to like all these men working hard to do this thing to provide so that one day they could live in that mystery again. Mm-hmm. Right. And so that one day, and then I started seeing these men die, and like men, just people, like just so many ages, and we're dealing with that on so many levels now. Mm-hmm. And even, to bring it back to Top Gun, to be so invested in it. It was a film that was done so well because it pulled all the triggers of those things, and flight and excitement. My grandfather was a World War II fighter pilot and instructor and wanted me to fly. And so that was really close to me. But, to also see someone die, and at a young age to watch that happen, to watch someone fall in love and go through that. And, it was alluring for me, like what I was going to go through the rest of my life. Like, but I thought it was this one day thing. But as you get older, you start to lose more people. And so I'm just...
Fear of death was a big one. I just to jump back to me, since
yeah.
I'm a guest. I was like, because I've been thinking about a lot of this stuff recently, but I realized that growing up in this, basically I was born in 62, so that like late 60s, early 70s, my fear as a kid was that I was going to go to Vietnam and die. And that I was convinced that that's where I had to go, because the war was in our house. And and my father was a World War II vet who suffered severe trauma, PTSD, when he was in the war at like 19, 20 years old, where he saw a German soldier die in front of him and was begging for water. He was dying and begging for water, and my father went past him. And the fact that he walked past a man who was dying and just wanted water, that he could be that inhumane traumatized him in a way in which I could just, the way he talked about it, and now years later, having been in recovery, I go like, oh, that's the moment where God left him in his mind. And that's where he devoid from God, from any belief in the mystery and the spirit, because how could there be a God if that kind of cruelty could happen? And I realized that those are the things that we carry, and that's what we've talked a lot about trauma and how it affects. And at 1 in 6, which is the organization I'm the chairman of, we deal with bringing awareness and breaking down stigma for men who suffered childhood sexual abuse, especially, and the fact that, because what you see when we talk about men dying is when the joy, when the mystery is taken away from a child in the form of a betrayal, which is basically what happens when an adult abuses a child. They break that child, because that child then is forced to be in a survival mode and a conditional love mode, where if they don't play by the rules, they'll die. In my case, if I didn't follow the rules, I would have been kicked out of the theater group, the group of 5 guys that we were the team. The abuser was our mentor teacher. If you didn't play by Gary's rules, you'd be kicked out, and that would be the end of your life. So you start these early foundations of life and love being conditional. Absolutely. And it wasn't until I was 52 years old, that my life, I got sick of doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result. And marriage was failing. All kinds of things were just coming to an end. I had no control anymore. And that's when I finally was confronted with the rage I had towards my abuser that had never been processed. The pain had never been processed, none of it. And I fortunately found recovery there. And that beginning of starting to look at childhood trauma of abuse was the shift of my life. That was the biggest transition in my life. After having tremendous success and all these other things. And, these God moments out of rage or trauma or those things can really, they're incredibly informative.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that so vulnerably with us, Tony. And I wanted to ask you that for those of people who are listening and don't know about 1 in 6 in your organization, and you're talking about sexual abuse here too. I just want to say thank you for talking about these things, and thank you for talking about it so openly. I watched my father really suffer as a man, and up until his 50s when he was able to finally start dealing with it. And so I can't imagine what it's like that I haven't. But I'm starting, because of you just saying 1 in 6 and starting this organization, it's been really inspiring. So for me, because I'm seeing just how big the impact is and how it's everywhere and how we need to be talking about it more. So for those people who don't really know what we're talking about, can you tell us a little bit about your organization and what was it that, you've been this successful actor and all that stuff, and this, but that doesn't mean that you have happiness or joy in your life. And, when you grew up, like, how did you get to, from the boy who was like, had that dream to where you are today? I'm asking you a lot of different questions. Let me see. There's so many things I want to know about you, Tony. Let me ask you this. When you're a little boy, what did you want to be when you grew up?
What I wanted to be an actor, because I experienced going into a theater and finding incredible safety in the ability that no matter who you were or what you did, you were accepted, whether you were on the stage as an actor or whether you were building the sets. The theater actually was my first experience of church, in a sense. So that was where I was like, when I was a little boy, I probably wanted to, I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be, good kind of classic stuff. But where the desire hit me of like, I want to be part of a community that makes this thing that is magic to me, where lights go down and people are on stage and the audience is thing. I mean, I saw Good Man Charlie Brown in San Francisco when I was like 10 years old or 9 years old with Gary Bergdorf, and I can just still see the shape of the seats and watching that show. And I was like, this is insane. Like this is magic. That was like my safe God place. That was really good place. Now, within that space, I was also a kid looking for a father because my dad, bless his heart, he couldn't be there because he didn't have the tools. He was damaged. He was deep in alcoholism. He was deep in sex abuse. Not to take my father's inventory, as we say, but, he had a lot of things where he was not present for. So I was looking for that. And when you're in that environment, and then in my case, a pedophile who's a mentor comes in, this becomes really good grounds to pick other kids that are looking for that kind of figure. And you'll hear about this repeatedly. And when people talk about grooming or the fact that, these abusers come in, because it's more about them having control and power over you than it is the sexual part. The sexual part is horrific and physical and all of that nightmare. But the emotional betrayal that happens when that becomes your life, they become your God in a sense. So in the irony of it though, the thing that I'd established early before that happened is what ultimately saved me. So even though he became my manager and I started working professionally when I was 16 and having success, whatever it was, that thing of the beauty of the real connection of acting and working together, right? That's what wasn't conscious, but it's like, I got to get out of this. And by the time I was 18, 19, I was gone from him, separated, and started another kind of business thing with and I had other agents and everything. He no longer managed me. And I kind of squeaked my way out where I realized God was taking care of me then. I didn't even know it. But I maintained all that fear. So that fear also made me incredibly productive because I was like, I'm going to friggin' make it no matter what. Because in my mind, as long as I could succeed as an actor, then I could live. I could have that fullness of being. And so I was like, didn't matter how many rejections, I kept going. And my persistence was, really, and I had to learn this craft. And part of that craft I'd learned from a not healthy, great person, but that person also was a teacher. That's the complication when you hear people talking about like this priest or this Jesuit taught me about the mountains and about mystery or about literature and these things. And so it doesn't compute. So you constantly have this fear going on. And that's where it manifested in continuing conditional. And I, went from relationship to relationship and eventually just gave up and was like, and I fell in love and married a person who was an incredibly powerful, smart person. And I just made her my God. And I was like, okay, I'll do whatever she said. And we had our 4 kids, but it was never a partnership. It was never a really, so anyway, so that led to, a real separation where you're not living in a loving life. And that's where classically, this is a story you hear from a lot of men. They start drinking, they start having affairs, because they're not understanding why we can't feel connected. And we're doing everything we can. And if we're lucky enough, we find these programs or have a break and don't kill ourselves, before that. Because So when I finally did do that at 52 and started to look, 1 in 6 had already been in existence. And a man named Steve Lepore started it, a survivor. And I met him through Mariska Hargitay, and Mariska Hargitay has this wonderful Joyful Heart Foundation, which deals with domestic abuse. And she's the one who told me, before you take out the ad in the Hollywood Reporter saying Goose and Dr. Green was molested by this man with a picture and my whole vendetta revenge fantasy, she was like, maybe you should go and take care of yourself first. And that was the best advice. And that's the underlying theme of 1 in 6 as an organization, is to support men in their healing. Because we don't know how you're going to heal, but to take the time and listen to and feel that something is wrong and finding the tools to then do the healing before you take actions. Because the male response is, let's go kill him, right? Like, let's go. That's the problem. We're going to get it. Where what we know, and we learn it through all kinds of traditions, you got to take care of yourself. You've got to find your peace there, so that then the actions that you do take in the rest of your life will be coming from a loving place, and they will reveal themselves as to what they are. And, that's why at 1 in 6, we get 2, 3 to, I think, 5 million hits a year. I mean, because when you say the statistic of 1 in 6 men were abused before they were 18 years old, that means there's 28 million American men right now walking around going, hey, well, it was no big deal. Because I will guarantee you this, 100% of the men that I've met who were abused when they were kids, the first thing they do when they speak about it is they minimize it. They're like, what happened to me was no big deal. Or, because in my case, it was like, well, my friend Scott, he was the one who was raped all the time. I got away, I didn't have that much physical, It's like there's a constant minimization, and you're never going to give yourself the opportunity to feel your way through these traumas if you keep minimizing yourself and your experience. And we have so much history of men don't cry, don't, stand up, suck it up, don't show your feelings. And if for some reason, look at the friggin' homophobia in this country. I mean, the Ron DeSantis saying that if someone's gay, they're a groomer, and that, anybody who's gay is a pedophile. I mean, it is like, that's fucking adults are saying that, and you're wondering why people are being quiet. I mean, I'm seeing New York City, and right now, people think, who creative people and producers think that even after they had the information where James Safechuck and Wade Robson and that beautiful documentary filmmaker made Leaving Neverland to tell the story of Michael Jackson's pedophilic child rape that he did on these 2 beautiful men when they were boys, even though that truth was put out there, any sane adult has never said to me or anybody, oh, they're lying, or it's not true what they said. They know that the truth is there. And yet people, what did they do? They took a musical that was called Can't Stop Till You Get Enough. They rename it MJ, the musical, and they act as if it's no big deal. And they had an opportunity to go, you know what? We're not going to do Harvey Weinstein, the musical. We're not going to do Jeffrey Epstein, the musical. But for some reason, there was so much money so the greed, I mean, this is what men are up against. No wonder you're going to stay silent. Like, why would I talk about this? And it's not even about people going public, but what about within the workplace? When we don't have a tradition or the ability to, it's what women dealt with forever, which was in domestic abuse or in violence, and what, police departments had to change it to, we believe you, because everybody's going to stay quiet. And then the healing doesn't happen, and more abuse happens, and we have more alcoholism, we have more addiction, we have more suicide, we have more, broken up families, because people aren't given the opportunity to process trauma.
Yeah.
Sorry, was that a good short answer for you?
Yeah, that's great. It's great. It answered all my next questions too. No, I really thank you for saying that. Thank you so much. There's a lot of people on here saying thank you right now, and just for having the courage to tell that story, and for being part of an organization and to face it yourself.
And the one thing I really also want to say too is, I'm in a rarefied position because I've been in the public. I've been talking about myself for years and for whatever thing. And the fact is, what we're asking, what we're talking about for men to do has nothing to do with going public. And in fact, the opposite. The Me Too movement, women, rightfully so, need to get up and get angry and scream out and yell, this happened to me, and Jeffrey, whatever it is, in a loud way, Bill Cosby, whatever, and be loud. Men have been angry, and this anger has been, staying in us. And the fact is, we don't need to get angrier. We need to get and we need to get quiet. So don't think that I'm trying to set an example that every man needs to write a letter and go public and do podcasts about their abuse. Quite the opposite, because I had to, before I could get to this point, I had to get really quiet and process to be able to, because, America, so much of action in America is considered like some kind of public display sport, and it shouldn't be that. And it isn't that, especially on things that are this intimate and this, you've got men who are like, I can't say this because my wife or my future wife won't want to have kids with me, because there's mythology that if someone has been abused, that they will go on to abuse. It's not true. There is no statistic. There's no fact. And in fact, it's the opposite, because people who are abused don't abuse other people. They abuse themselves. They continue to abuse on themselves. Yes, there are people who were abused, but there's not a correlation to, if you're abused, you will then go and abuse others. But there's a mythology about that.
Yeah.
And add to that, a young gay person who is then thought of, that this is some kind of like homo, gay dream that you get to have little boys. Like, there's not. I have a lot of gay friends that are not supportive and know that, because the fact is, no child can consent to sex.
Yeah.
It's not allowed. It's not illegal. 14-year-olds cannot legally consent to sex.
Thank you for saying all this. A lot's soaking in, and I'm like, as I think about you, I'm also reflecting on my father and everything he started to teach me as he faced it growing up. But I remember him telling me that he didn't realize it till he was in his 50s, because he was talking to a therapist, and the therapist told him the dreams he was having about him as a little boy, like that he had as a little boy, these sexualized dreams were not normal for kids to have, like remembering being touched in certain ways as a little boy, and that like that wasn't a dream, basically, that those kids don't just have dreams like that, right, unless it's put in their heads. And that's when my father first came to terms with it. And like you said, he also was sort of in a privileged environment where he was in a church and used to talking to people and could start a support group and all of that. But for those men who are, or for anyone who doesn't have that support and isn't used to talking about anything like that, what would you recommend for a first step?
Well, I'd recommend going to the website at 1and6.org, because I think one of our greatest assets we have, one of our greatest things we have is a thing called the Briscone Project. And it's over 150 men who, with their picture and they tell bits of their stories of recovery. And I would say start by looking and relating and seeing, so that you can really deeply understand that you're not alone. And the important thing here is we may have different stories in our details, but our experiences are the same. And I think once you start to feel that you're not alone, you will find hopefully places to open up, to have that conversation where it's safe, whether it's your wife, your sister, your aunt, your uncle, a therapist. There's no cure-all, or like you have to get into the most important thing is to be able to start a conversation. Because once words come out of your mouth and become real or written down, we change. I mean, you and I talk about that a lot. That's what we talk about in recovery. Like, you can't do this alone. So to first understand that you're not alone, and then find safe places. I've got a group, 14 guys, 16 guys. We meet every Thursday night at 8:00, and we just talk. And we have a shared experience there. And that's People talk about, oh, women are so gabby and they get together. I'm telling you, you get like 4 fucking, male survivors together, and it's like no one will shut up. It's like a bad
Yeah.
game party is what it is. So like, no, 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 you know what happened to me? And then you just keep because it's been like, it's just not part of our DNA. It's not how we're trained. Gay, straight, doesn't matter. We're not, taught that to be expressive, open. Oh, that's female. That's that. That's the other thing. And that's, you know, this is behavior and stuff that we have to learn. And that's where, we have online support groups. So that's another thing. We're going to have, I think we have, I don't know, 8 a week now. We're going to go up to 25 online support groups where you can go in and just be anonymous and talk, and just, you can experience communicating without putting your face up. You don't have to go public. You don't have to do that. You just have to find a safe place to start the conversation. And from there, it may lead to, if you can, to trauma-informed care. If you're going to get a therapist, if you're going to start looking at this professionally, make sure the therapist you work with understands about early childhood trauma, because it's a specific kind of way of looking at this where, because you hear these horror stories of guys who've been in therapy for 10, 15 years, and the therapist has been saying, like, just get over it, like, so touched you, you've got to, give yourself the opportunity to have that. There's lots of information on the website. There's other books. There's great books that are on there to start reading and gathering information. A new one just came out called Chosen by Stephen Mills. And Stephen, it's just been released. He's an incredible writer. And he describes how the grooming happened for him when he was a kid in the most spectacular way, because you realize, the most important thing, hopefully, when you get to saying, being able to communicate or have the conversation, is the realization this is something that happened to you. You didn't do it. You didn't bring it on. Because what men carry is the shame. The shame is, I wanted love. I loved Gary. I loved him. I was 12 years old. He was amazing. He was spectacular. He was charming. He charmed my parents. He charmed everything. I loved him. I was doing what a child's job is to do, which is to love things. It's the adults and parents that break that. You are not responsible for that. But a good abuser will make you feel responsible for that. And to the point where they're like, this is the love that I can give you, and this is what love is. And they redefine love. And with that comes shame. And you carry that shame your whole life, that there's something wrong with you because you wanted to love. It was like a year and a half ago, listening to a podcast of a woman who was abused, had a minor sex, but the way she spoke about it and the way she talked about her feeling of it was somehow her fault. I was walking through the West Village, and I went over and I began dry heaving. I mean, the physical response that can happen when you're triggered by things that bring you back to the truths of these feelings are overwhelmingly powerful and can be very scary if you don't understand that we carry this trauma with us.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, and for those resources as well. I've put these I've posted them in the comments, and I'll also post them with this episode as well and online. Yeah, right. For sure. And you mentioned shame, and I think that's something that, a lot of people can relate to. And I've seen a lot of people getting almost like some of the men I've worked with be addicted to shame in a way. It's something that we get used to and we get trained for. And most of what I see adults struggling with is how we've been programmed or groomed, as you say too, and conditioned to be a certain way and to respond to things a certain way, and learning that this is what love is. And
we get so used to that.
Yeah, it's familiar, right? Even abuse is familiar.
Of pain is much more comforting than the unknowing, right? Yeah. And that's the breaking these habits. So, yeah.
So there's also a great book called The Body Keeps Score that was recommended to me because I mean, I remember as an actor and like sitting in Strasbourg in a chair being like, oh, when strong emotions come up, like letting them out. And I realized, wow, we were actually creating safe spaces to release trauma. I don't know how trauma informed everyone was in the room, some of the teachers, but I realized how much of a privilege that is. And, you know, I'm always looking for how to help people who aren't just like actors or like get to roll around and talk about their feelings all day. Like, how can we access these things and get into our body and learn from our body and access that? So I'm wondering, you know, what are some of the ways you've been able to reparent yourself or reprogram some of that shame? What are some of the ways you do that in your life?
You know, I think the physical part, what has been important to me, and when I was 37, I kind of got addicted to running, because I found that when I went out and jogged, because I was never fast or anything, but when you say you carry it in the body, my body actually changes. The energy changes enough that I could feel a reset happening. And that reset was real. I realized I needed that. Those endorphins, that thing that happened, was really critical to my sanity, because I always felt better and felt different after a run or after a thing. And that's, you know, I was medicating with that, because that's the definition of medication. We're changing something, right? We're moving it, shifting it. I found, 8 years ago when I started my recovery, meditation was huge. Like, I'd never my mom had meditated. I wondered why. What was that about? And I went to TM, and it was great. It was like giving that opportunity to turn that thing off, where you were like, I had no idea that it could turn off. Like, I thought it just was always on a spin cycle, because that seemed normal. The spin cycle of fear was normal, you know, and as an actor, that serves you, because as an actor, you go to a room and you're like, okay, I can assess all the things. I know who all the power players are. I know who to get, you know, because you're in a fear mode of, if I don't, my job here is to succeed, is to be liked, or to be, you know, it's like that thing of people accusing you, like, oh, you just want to be liked. And it's like, well, it's okay to want to be liked, but it can't be how you define yourself. But in recovery, that's the part that was really helpful, because I was afraid if I looked at this stuff, then it would all go away, because everything I've defined myself as an actor and success of everything was all based on fear. So if I look at this fear, then that's it. I'll never know how to act again. And it's like, that's the beauty of recovering with other people, is you realize you don't lose you recover the good. You're not cutting off an arm or a heart or your ability to have empathy.
Yeah.
You're actually removing the things that put you into fear, and fear is not creative. and in a funny way, the time between action and cut was so important to me, because that was full trust time. I had full unconditional love in that time with other actors. And it was like, no wonder I was really good on that show, because it really meant a lot to me to keep that reality alive.
That was your safe space.
That was the safe space, which is so crazy. What, make believe, pretending to do something is a safe space? It's like, well, that's how God works, you know?
Yeah, and then the show ends, and then you got to deal with that trauma. It's like,
it's like, oh, right. No, you know, but there is that God voice in us, which is like wanting us to do the right thing, to be in that safe space. And we can only do that I could only do that by dealing with the shame, dealing with that, like realizing it wasn't my fault. It wasn't up to me. I didn't, you know, to this day, I was talking to a friend who was around in that time, in that world when we were kids. And I was like, you know, my best friend died of AIDS in 1997. And it was part of our group. And it was, you know, the one who was raped by Gary repeatedly. And I just thought, wow, if I'd spoken up and done something, would he have had a less, insane life as a gay man that wouldn't have let, like, you just go into this place because the fear is, what you go back to is that place that the abuser or the alcoholic or the addict puts you in, which is, I'm doing this because of you, so it's your fault. And that's the shame we carry.
Yeah.
I mean, right? That's what, like,
yeah.
In the alcoholic families, it's like, you know, they have to drink because their life is so miserable because of their kids or because of their, you know.
Yeah.
It's
And I heard you, yeah, or whatever they're, go ahead.
It's amazing how blame and shame rhyme, right?
Yeah. And their lack of tools or whatever they got or didn't get, you know, like God help their generation and their parents. And before we were
giving them for their actions, but we can have empathy for it because we understand our own actions and we have empathy for our own experience.
Yeah. And you talked about safety too. Like, we learn how to be safe, and that I loved you mentioning that moment between action and cut, you know, of that safe space and trying to find those safe spaces. And so that really resonated with me, and as an actor, like trying to find that the time when we can control it or just be in the moment and let go of everything else and be with the energy, like connected to everyone, and we're all pulling for this moment. Right. And you get to live those, and then those moments end, right? And then you face yourself again, or those parts, you know, I mean, it can be really cathartic to work through some of that on stage and then through characters. I mean, I've gotten to play some abusers and people who have been abused, and it's helped open my eyes. But
it's like, what is one of the great tools that you have to first learn as an actor is trust, right? You do those trust exercises. You fold your arms and you fall back and trust that people are going to catch you.
Yeah.
And that's when life is alive. You know?
And I liked your and you mentioned too about creating more safe spaces for us now, that we can, you know, it doesn't probably occur to a lot of people to feel safe to start talking about, you know, your abuse in places, or just openly share some deep, dark emotions, right? And so I just want to thank you for doing that. That's one of the reasons why I created this podcast and the Lion's Den, some more safe spaces for men to try to find, because I see them for women, and I know they're out there for men, and sometimes we have to create them or seek them out. How have you found? So that place was a safe space. How did you deal with the time when you weren't in between action and cut? What were the ways you took care of yourself, or what did it look like then?
I mean, I joke, but like, I started running marathons. I learned to fly a plane. I got my instrument. Like, I would go into I just started like, I just had to do things, redo a house, do geographics. It was like move. You know, in my program, I love the expression, which is, don't just do something, sit there, because that was the opposite of me. It was only do something, just keep doing, because, and that's why going to work and being in a triplet was like, oh, good, we can just pretend here and be in that, because fear is what was driving. And as a lot of people, you know, there's a lot of very successful people who've built things, you know, they're not necessarily creative, but they get a lot done out of fear.
Yeah. It can drive a lot.
Yeah.
But then not sustainable ultimately. Yeah. And you know, you mentioned, I felt like men had enough anger, and that there's an opportunity to soften now. And I heard you say sort of the opposite of that, going and coming back to the stillness. And I just want to reflect that again, because I think it's so beautiful to, especially in this productivity time and hyper productivity in business and tech, how much it's important to be still. Mm-hmm. and take the time to actually listen to our bodies and be with that. So what are some of the ways that you do that in your life today? Do you have any kind of routines or morning routine or any spaces that you create to help yourself, to help create stillness and listening and recovery in your life?
Yeah, you know, one thing that helps me is I always notice that the morning really reveals itself as to where I'm at when I wake up. And sometimes I'll wake up and I'll be spinning a bit. I'll be thinking, I'm a father of 4, and where are my kids? What could I do differently? Everything. And putting the thoughts into words is really helpful. So I don't journal every day, but when things are up, I feel like just getting it down, whether I'm just writing it out, just daily thoughts, putting that in there. I guess that people call it a God box, in a way. You put stuff up that you want to hand over because it's not fitting. And I find that really helpful. Being of service, I find really helpful. I mean, like this opportunity to be able to do this work at 1 and 6, that was always a big savior for me. And even before my recovery, I did it working with being a spokesman for autism families and, working in autism awareness in that world, because I was had 4 healthy kids and these people who have anyway, it's that feeling that it's just reinforcing the idea of how can I get out of myself and be in another world, because once you're putting the focus on helping someone else, you open up stuff for yourself. Because yes, self-examination is important, but that has to be done in a loving way. And when I'm not doing that in a loving way, then I'm beating myself up. I'm shaming myself. I'm going like, oh, I could have, I should have. What if? Oh my God, my daughter hasn't called me in 3 days. What does that mean? And I go into all the fear, all the projections. And so in a sense, being active, not in a destructive way, but trying to, and also just taking that nature or that peaceful time. I mean, my wife and I now, coffee and the crossword puzzle in the morning is really great. It's really perfect. And we feel like we look at each other and we're like, we're old people and this is what old people do. And it feels good.
Well, it's great that you've created a routine and time with your partner and something that, helps set your brain in the morning and listening. Yeah. I wonder, as someone who would like to be a father and as working on that, as a father for and a working actor and an artist and a speaker and an advocate and a husband, you get roles. We actually surfed the wave together at the beginning of this video. It was so incredible. I meant to share how amazing it was to run into you on the beach in Costa Rica. And that was one of those God moments for me as my wife and I were searching for community and asking, for some signs of where to be. And the gift of you and your humility and your love always is just really moving to me as a human and a father. So I just want to say, how do you cultivate and nurture yourself, balance all these different things now today when you're like, oh, I got to get this role now and go this place or show up on Broadway, Girl from North Country featuring 6 nights on book at an hour notice.
Well, that's where it's those are those constant reminders of really work that, the acronym, right? Future events already ruined, fear, when the fear, it's just another God moment going you have no idea what's really going to happen. There's always going to be surprises. So quit trying to think you can control the future in any way. And the more I just stay in the moment and try and stay in this day, I know I'm going to make my plans and that'll all be fine. But I'm not acting in the moment out of thinking about the future. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's my practice, to try and stay in that. And, it's that brings me solace and also continues to reveal to me these crazy surprises and things that I didn't know were going to happen, or that God moment. I mean, because the fact has been, I so remember the first time I heard you speak, it must have been 6 years ago, or 5 years ago, and it just hit me so hard. I was like, oh my God, this truth you were speaking about being a husband and an actor and it just, I was I knew at that moment, I'm going to know this guy. Like, and the fact that then how our lives have crossed in ways that we could never have planned for.
Yeah.
I mean, literally to be like, oh, we are. There's been, and like those kind of connections. And it's really, and it reminds me of great friendships or what love is. Love is the fact that you can start and pick up and end with a person, another person. It could be over 10 years. It could be you don't see them for 30 years. But those moments that you have where you're connected and have that, or whether you get them every day in a row or once a week or anything, is proof that it's all going to be okay. It's all going to be okay because that is what's driving the universe. Because it's not the fear, it's not the abusers, it's not the alcohol, it's not the addiction. Those are the things that are taking people away from love. And, you know, you just turn into a big old friggin' old hippie and just say, you know, it's all about love because it is. It's only about love. That's all that matters. You know, we were saying, it's been like this last 6 weeks we've gone through, like, had my mom's memorial. My wife's mother was sick. She died. We had her memorial. We had a birth of a grandchild. We had a cat who I loved for 15 years, died up in, you know, and and the show's open, understudies went out, you know, I had to go on stage. Like so much has happened intensely. We joked at the beginning of the show, like, apparently we only get what we can handle. And you get something like that, and you're like, wow, apparently we can handle a lot. So I'm not going to worry about worse things happening because I also experienced my life. I thought the breakup of my family and getting a divorce would be the absolute worst nightmare of my life. And it happened. And I'm here. And I'm better and happier, not because of that, but because of the lessons and the things I've gotten to learn because I stayed with life. And that's all we need to do. We need to stay with this life because if we want to learn and have things revealed to us, God, in my experience, says you just got to show up, you know, and if you show up for friends, your loved ones, and for yourself, you know, you'll get a good ride. Like when we go surfing, right?
Yeah. Just like showing up and letting go.
The wave always wins. So.
It's a great, yeah. And I remember even asking you, that's why, like, I always like to surf with guys a little bit older than me because it keeps me, like, remembering to do what I love and to have more fun and that I can, like just any, you know, that we can take even age out of it. And I see you also having fun in your life and following love. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing all of this love with us today and reminding us of that. And and truth too, like really owning your truth.
It's a funny thing because when that's a great flag when someone you know is avoiding the truth, you know they're in trouble. There's something that's hurting, and that's what we can talk about in relation to survivors. Like, because speaking the truth can never be wrong. It can't. I mean, there might be appropriate times, and maybe it would, but you can never deny it or avoid it because the truth, it's really, really important.
Thank you for that important reminder. Yeah, we probably can't hear it enough, especially today. This is a really bad, funny analogy. My wife just took an Uber home here and said, by the way, the Uber driver told me to tell you that your score is very low, and that's probably why you're not getting many Ubers. And I was thinking, wow, I'm so nice to people. Like, I don't understand. And he said, yeah, and he didn't understand why his scores are low either. And she said, well, you know, I think people really aren't honest with each other this day and age. You know, and then they'll go and you know, may write you a review behind your back. But you know, just the honesty can really bring us closer, and it is what can set us free.
Yeah.
So thank you for that reminder today. I really got that out of your share and out of hearing you. If you were, I've got a few closing questions for you, Tony. I ask all my guests. If your life was a movie, what would be the title?
Wow. Like,
What's the first thing that comes to mind?
yeah, it's a great quote of my my wife's grandson, who's now my grandson because we're married. It's quote. He said it. He was like, here's one. He said, "You never know. You never know." So I think it would be, "You never know."
That's great.
You never know. So get the hell out of your mind because you never know.
That's awesome. And what would the name of the movie be if your wife named it?
Of me,
Yeah.
yeah, ham bone.
That's great. And who would you cast as your parents?
um, wow, I just went like Jack Lemmon and Dinah Shore.
Nice. That's an awesome couple. And lastly, if there was one gift that you could give the world today, what would it be?
Humility.
And if we all had humility, what do you see us all doing?
Yeah, being able to love.
Nice. Well, thank you for reminding us of that love, and thank you to everyone who's listening. Don't forget to please subscribe and share this with someone who could use it. Help the algorithms of love overcome all the other stuff they're trying to promote. And I wanted to say thank you, Tony, for sharing your heart and your time so generously with us and dancing with me. And yeah, I'm just really grateful for you. And there's so much important wisdom here. And I want to remind everyone as well to check out the link in the comments, the 1in6.org, and to follow Tony. And
Not alone.
Tony, is there a place that we can follow your work?
I kind of stopped. Like I had an Instagram and I stopped it. I think I'm going to line it up with 1in6 and do it because I just found it broke my heart, the whole thing.
Yeah.
But to follow, just Google and look at old movies and those, no apologies for any of it. I just want to keep working and, I'm happy to be here.
We're happy to have you here, Tony. Would you give us a "Dude, You're Getting Well" to take us out?
Dude, you are getting well.
Thank you.
I hear it. Thank you for doing this, Ben. You're a hero.
It's my pleasure, Tony. And thank you all for listening. Have a beautiful day and join us